Where's Hathaway? That was the question on pretty much every UFC fan's lips since his last fight in 2014. The Hitman revealed in 2018 that his 8-year layoff was because of his battle with ulcerative colitis, but he didn't let it hold him down. Now at 35, the Brighton native has a 4-fight deal with the European promotion, and if he proves himself, he could be UFC bound before even completing his contract. Here's everything we know. First things first, he never wanted to leave. A relatively young British fighter, John Hathaway, managed to remain undefeated with a score of 4-0 in the UFC and 14-0 throughout his career. His most notable victory came against American pro MMA fighter Diego Sanchez at UFC 114. Hathaway never considered hanging up his gloves, even when he was struggling to overcome the often debilitating symptoms of ulcerative colitis. His love for combat sports never left him, and his desire to compete again brought him back to the UFC. Hathaway said on the MMA Hour that he didn't finish his career in the way that he wanted to finish it, and it felt like it was taken away from him in that sense. The 35-year-old fighter added that he was just lucky to have managed to get to a point where he could compete again. Moving on, what is ulcerative colitis, and how did it affect Hathaway's performance? The Hitman was once hailed as the next British UFC star, but his career looked like it was about to be over 8 years ago when he was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, a type of Crohn's disease. During his career, he was able to put together a 3-fight win streak, but in March 2014, he got taken out by Dong Hyun Kim with a brutal spinning elbow. By this point, the disease was getting in the way of Hathaway's career and forcing him to turn down fights while he attempted to find a quick resolution for the issue. It causes digestive tract inflammation and ulcers, resulting in pain, difficulty using the restroom, and weight loss. The disease progresses over time and can result in potentially fatal symptoms such as bleeding. Hathaway said that the disease began to affect his training after his first professional setback, a decision loss to Mike Pyle in 2010. In some camps, he was able to train normally, but in others, he was forced to take an anti-inflammatory medication, which ended up causing other unwanted side effects. Hathaway explained that it was just a general kind of discomfort, not as painful as getting cut, shot, or stabbed or anything like that. On an average day, it would be a low-level discomfort all the time, but it would get worse as it flared up, and it made it even more uncomfortable. This made it extremely hard for him to train to a good level, really, because he'd end up being constantly fatigued. Now, let's talk about how the disease altered the course of his life. Hathaway realized that he couldn't continue his career while dealing with the disease after turning down 3 or 4 fights. He didn't officially retire, but the promotion gave him the opportunity to address his health concerns. The UFC's anti-doping partner, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, continued to test him throughout his layoff, which he didn't mind. They still tested him at least 3-4 times every year during the last 8 years, but Hathaway said that all the guys that came and tested him were super nice, so he didn't mind. Since he was on different medications before his surgery, the MMA fighter made sure he had everything written down because they'd always catch him at the gym teaching, or sometimes first thing in the morning. It sounds frustrating, but Hathaway still decided to look at the bright side of his situation. He explained that in hindsight, the consistent drug testing kept him clean for the last 8 or 7 years, so he didn't have to have any set-in period where they needed to test him for the next 6 months to make sure he wasn't taking anything. Followed by, the 35-year-old UFC veteran went through multiple surgeries for his career. It's taken nearly 8 years and 3 surgeries, including one to remove a 5-pound piece of his large bowel and another to install a stoma bag for waist, for Hathaway to get where he is now. Hathaway claimed he was technically cured, but doctors initially worried what would happen if he took a body shot in the gym. He was eventually able to return to normal functioning. He no longer needs the waist bag and can train normally, though his dietary choices have a greater impact on him than ever before. Regaining health was not an easy process. Hathaway's low point occurred while he was recovering in the hospital following his first surgery. It was close to Christmas, and the private hospital where he'd gone for the procedure was half empty. He felt like the main character in 28 Days Later, walking around the empty hallways with an IV bag in his hand to stimulate his bowel. Coming up, why did it take so long for Hathaway to get to this point? A lot of it has to do with where he left off with the UFC. A 1-year layoff is a pretty significant absence. Hathaway had been gone more than half a decade, and so many of the opponents he fought back in the day had retired or were no longer in the UFC. The idea that he could simply come back and pick up where he left off didn't really seem realistic to his longtime promoter. Hathaway explained that they didn't really know what to do with him. They didn't just want to chuck him back into the game after such a long break in case he didn't have any ability left in him. Technically, the Englishman was still signed to the UFC, but both parties decided it was best he took a tune-up fight after being out of action for so long. It just took a little while to get an organization that would accept him. Hathaway said that he'd start negotiating with the UFC on a return return. But until then, he's going to enjoy his first trip back to the cage. He never expected to be gone this long, but he's confident that he's close to where he was when he left. Followed by, the former UFC welterweight contender returned to MMA with a dominant win. The British fighter looked as good as ever against Ricardo, whom he dominated on the ground for 3 rounds to win a unanimous decision at Oktagon 36 on October 15. John Hathaway looked like he hadn't missed a beat, despite not having competed in an MMA fight since Barack Obama was president of the United States. Making his return to the cage after an 8-year absence, the former UFC standout put on a classic Hathaway performance, cruising to a unanimous decision over Ricardo on Saturday at Oktagon 36 in Frankfurt, Germany. The judges scored the bout in favor of Hathaway, whose performance earned him his first win since UFC on Fuel TV back in September 2012. For all 3 rounds, the story was the same. Hathaway took Ricardo down and proceeded to pelt him with punches, elbows, and hammer fists at his own pace. Hathaway also appeared completely at ease doing it. According to the statistics shown on the Oktagon 36 broadcast, Hathaway landed 116 significant strikes to Ricardo's 2, and he knocked his opponent out a good 7 times. Ricardo carried Hathaway's weight for the majority of the fight. Hathaway almost got the finish in the final 30 seconds of round 2. He flattened Ricardo onto his stomach and rained punches on him. When Ricardo squirmed on his back, Hathaway held the mount position and pounded him with punches and hammer fists, but the bell saved him. Before his MMA comeback, Hathaway claimed he was cured and revealed that he no longer needs to use a waist bag. The pro fighter did have one very important precaution to keep in mind though. He has to be very careful about what and when he eats. It could set back all the progress he's made with his health and career as mentioned before. Finally, could this mean that the Hitman is returning to the MMA scene? After the fight, Hathaway said that it meant a lot to him to be able to finally have a real, enjoyable kind of fight. He apologized for being unable to get the finish in, but it was his first one out in 8 years, so he kinda had to put the work in, go for the gears, and figure out where he was. Hathaway tried his best, but obviously it's been a while. The Hitman had no reason to apologize though. His 15 minutes of domination reminded everyone why he was once considered the UK's greatest hope for a UFC champion. John Hathaway's return to the cage after his harrowing battle with ulcerative colitis was a victory in and of itself, and the fact that the 35-year-old looked as dominant as ever made it that much sweeter a victory. After his fight at the Oktagon 36, Hathaway now has the option of returning to the Oktagon again in 2023 on the table. That's a wrap for this video. Are you inspired by the Hitman's journey? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.